Okay, never mind. So first of all, Martin, thank you for the nice comment about the history. You're right about the history and how it guides us for again, where we've been and where we are going. As far as your question, I repeat it because you're recording, is yes. So what is happening, we find in the more developed economies is there's two things we find. So the taste is changing. It's getting more into, I was almost going to do something on cocktails, for instance, more different taste. Winery is becoming more adaptable, more, especially with the middle class, upper middle class is they're moving into that. But also non-alcoholic, there's a competition with the health. But when you look at the developing markets, and we looked at, again, you saw that like Latin America, Asia being number one, and then even in Africa, for instance. So what is happening is the growth of the middle class and also the sports. And I think it is easy for consumption. It's it is, again, it's more of a demographics. When you look at even India, for instance, is very much growing. You look at Vietnam, and of course China being the largest consumer. So yes, even in Europe, you notice there were a lot of Eastern European. We talked about Central Europe. So basically, yeah, I agree. I think demographically things will be moving away from more of the Western world, and that's why I wanted that demographics about even aging population, what brand they prefer, and again, it's always this new ideas coming into the picture. Nowadays, I also hear, um, some places, like for instance, nobody puts lime or lemon in their beer, and they look at you funny. So it's like it's all these new ideas with this hard seltzer. I mean, the beer combined with, I don't know, with different hard drinks, or I don't know. There's trying to come up with new ideas, but yeah, I think a majority of the growth will come, in my opinion, from developing countries. I agree. Any any other question or comments?
I mean, you mentioned
Uh,
all the big companies there, really. Isn't it close to being a duopoly or like a, I mean, there's four main companies, maybe.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, a lot of consolidation, a lot of big companies. Yeah, it's um I remember when I did the analysis about 15 years ago, or was it 14 years ago, and it was a lot more variety. I was analyzing different companies. Now we have really uh, that I mentioned about the horizontal marriage. I mean, now Pepsi Cola is getting involved with, and then you have, yeah, I agree with that as well. And that's why it shows. So it's these microbreweries sound interesting, and that's why I said you don't have to really work investment ideas just on the breweries. These I know I've had some friends and which are actually portfolio managers, by the way, Jean-Claude, and they've been working on uh, registering their patent for the homemade beer that they've been working on. So I um, I remember actually I mentored one of my students, and he is a CFA charter holder. He's a portfolio manager now, and he was so passionate about it. And finally, he was doing his own home cooking, and I was thinking about those machines. You will see a lot of people are using that, so I thought that would be another investment idea. But yeah, more and more people becoming more of a niche, I think, which could be a failure rate could be higher, but that could be something. And I was gonna call him. He's in Texas now. He lives there, and I was gonna ask him to join us just because of the subject, because that's fascinating that he was so passionate to creating his own beer. It was like it was amazing. But yeah, so I think it will be more of a niche than anything else now for the future.
Yeah, it just appears in any business, Ramin, that, if you're a small niche company that's ends up being successful and only like 10% up being doing, you end up being bought by the big company, whether it's beer or meat production or some form of grocery, any sort of niche thing. Once it gets successful, the competition go, we really don't like to compete. We're just going to absorb you.
Exactly. It's the most cost effective, isn't it? Yeah.
Mhm.
I agree. Yeah. Very good.
No, and that's true. But like, is Monster Beverage, was it just one drink or did they have many? Because they went crazy.
What was that?
Monster
Monster.
Beverage.
Oh, well, there used to be Hanson's, right? So, yeah, I mean, um, that son of a gun. I mean, they've been just, again, that's another competition in a way, you see that, yeah, Jean-Claude, I
Wonder
agree.
what they did differently that they, were able to dominate like that against the competition. It's an interesting case study.
It is. I mean, we talked about it, they were number one first 20 years of 21st century, going up 87,000%. I mean, if you would have invested 10 million, it would have been, I mean, 10,000, you would have had 8.7 million or 87 million actually. So it's like, it's, first they were different. Again, they started as a Hanson, which was alternative, especially in California, that was big. But then, that, caffeine and all the other things, mixing it up. And I see people come, they buying, I know in Southern California, they buy their beer and then they have that huge, the caffeine monster beverage with it, the Red Bull and all the other
Mhm.
things too. I mean, there's just these energy drinks and I've never been a consumer of that, so I'm not familiar. I don't even think I've tasted one. But also the sports, right? Jean-Claude, they got smart, those sponsorship and other thing. They became very visible, and that also
Mm,
played a huge role in their visibility.
Mhm.
yeah,
Ramin, you
but
might
you
have
could
saw today
see,
that like Red Bull are going to sponsor Newcastle next year.
Oh wow, yeah.
Sorry, Red Bull are going to sponsor Leeds. Sorry,
Leeds.
not.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry,
Oh,
Jean, I interrupted you.
I could see, I was just saying, you could see one of these. There's so many of these microbrewers that one of them could just make it big, but you still know which one it will be
yeah.
beforehand.
Yeah, exactly. And there are not many of them are public. They're few. And I remember when cannabis was coming out, every company all of a sudden they're just getting listed because they thought they're going to be the next multi-billion-dollar company, and you know majority of them just fizzled, and now it's all private little companies. But would have been a good time, I think, like 6 or 7 years ago when the whole regulation was going through, to buy like 20 of them and let 18 of them go belly up and two of them go up 10,000%. So
Yeah.
but it's a very niche market, right? So I just thought it would be interesting because you can apply the same analysis to other beverages, and we can do that like even with there's wine companies, and you think about Constellation, for instance, which is still, they're also involved with beer, but Constellation, with a lot of um, that's a big, STZ, that's a huge presence in the beverages. So, but something
To
different.
your question, Martin, earlier, when I was in London, securitizing these pub portfolios in the UK, and one of their big revenue streams was beer, of course, and beer sales. And in our models, when we're doing all these market analyses, you would see a decline in beer consumption, about like very steady 2% a year, and
Mhm.
that's because of people moving towards those wines and those spritzer drinks, and so you had like this the mix was changing, and so while the majority of people in pubs were still drinking beer, but it was just declining, at around 2% a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, John. Look, so the other thing anecdotally is that when I go back to England, over the course of the last 20 years, a beer seems comparatively more expensive when you consider like the average wage of the working man. So when I had my first job and I was making 89 cents an hour at my very first job. So I would make something just over £7 a day, work. But I could still go to the pub because a beer was like, 28 pence.
Mm.
I think now that ratio's changed whereby I don't know what the minimum wage in England is, but I think it's maybe £5 or £6 an hour, but a beer costs about £5. So
Yeah.
the disposable income you have to buy beer, it is less and less. And as Ramin knows, the favorite thing of any government, especially the government in England, is that they call them sin taxes. So anytime they need to raise money, they raise the tax on beer and they raise the tax on cigarettes.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, and I think if you look at the economy in England, it's not that great. So it's one of those things you cut back on.
Point. Yeah. Oh.
I've got way too much anecdotal knowledge on alcohol, John. So probably not good.
Awesome. Well,
I know
excellent.
that Altria, Philip, Altria MO, I think uh, they own a big chunk of, I think, InBev. Big,
Aren't they the cigarette company, Jean-Claude?
yeah, they are, and they have a big, big part of their investment is in alcohol.
That makes sense. That's what
Isn't that weird that you're buying a tobacco company, but indirectly you're buying shares in, I think it's InBev. I think so.
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, I remember 20 years ago. I mean, it's crazy to think about now. You would go to a bar and 75% of the people in there would be smoking. So you'd come out the bar, you'd almost have to throw your clothes away because they stunk of cigarettes, because the two
Yeah.
things went together.
Yeah.
And one of the big arguments when they banned smoking in bars, they said, well, this will stop people drinking because people like to smoke when they drink. But I don't think it really did.
Yeah. Good point. All right. Well,
And in
good.
Eastern Europe, another anecdotal fact, then I'll end with my anecdotal facts about
Okay.
alcohol. I mean, I know that like the Czech Republic is a huge weekend spot for people in England to go. So just to go for the weekend or go for a bachelor party or go for a stag do. So yeah, that's part of the attraction.
Yeah. No, good point. I would have loved to have Yano here. It would have been good to get from uh his perspective, and because he's from there, he played professional soccer there, and it would be good to but yeah. Anyway, all right. I really appreciate. Thanks for being here. Thanks for all the input. It's always fun to talk to you. And awesome. Well,
Thanks for me. Thanks, Jean-Claude.
thank you. Thank you.
Guys, see you
Thank you.
next time.
Yes, you
Until
shall.
next time.
I
Take
appreciate it.
care, boys.
Have a great,
Jean-Claude, I'll be trading with you soon, hopefully.
Hopefully, I'm waiting.
yeah.
Okay. You'll need to catch me up.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Jean-Claude.
Bye.
Thanks for me.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Bye.